I'm trapped inside my gold Honda Odyssey van. I probably don't have much time left. Tell my mom I love her if I die. The voice isn't screaming. It's a strained, wet rasp. It's the sound of someone trying to talk while a semi-truck is parked on their chest. It's the sound of the air being squeezed out of a person, one agonizing inch at a time. Then the line goes flat. Not a hang-up, just empty space. It was a Tuesday in Cincinnati, April 10th, 2018. The kind of afternoon where the sky is that aggressive, pale blue, and the air smells like damp mulch and car exhaust. 16-year-old Kyle Plush pulled his 2004 gold Honda Odyssey into the parking lot of the Seven Hills School around 3 p.m. He was a sophomore. He had a tennis match. Think about that for a second. The mundane, repetitive nature of a high school athlete schedule. You park. You grab your bag. You head to the courts. You're thinking about your serve or the homework you didn't finish, or the girl in third period who laughed at your joke. You aren't thinking about the car you're sitting in. To anyone else, that gold minivan was a mom car. It was a bubble of safety. It had cup holders filled with loose change and probably a few stray tennis balls rolling around under the seats. It was the last place on earth where you'd expect to fight for your life. Kyle realized his gear was in the very back. He didn't want to walk all the way around to the trunk, so he did what any of us would do. He climbed over the middle row of seats, reaching into the rear cargo area. The interior of the van was warm. That specific, stale warmth that happens when a car sits in the sun for an hour. He could hear the distant thwack of tennis balls hitting rackets from nearby courts. He probably smelled the nylon of his gym bag. He leaned his chest hard against the top of the folded third-row bench, stretching his arm out to snag the strap of his gear. I can imagine his thoughts in that moment. Just one more inch. If I can just hook the bag, I can get out of here and get to the court. He wasn't scared. He was just annoyed that his bag was out of reach. He shifted his weight, putting all 150 pounds of his teenage frame onto the top edge of that seat. And then the latch failed. The sound wasn't a bang. It was a heavy mechanical thud click. The third-row seat, designed to flip back into a stowaway position, suddenly sprang upward and backward. Because Kyle was leaning over it, the seat didn't just fold. It acted like a catapult, flipping him head first into the floor of the rear cargo well. He landed on his back, his head near the rear door, his legs tangled up toward the ceiling. And the seat, that heavy 70-pound bench of metal and foam, slammed down directly on top of his chest. At first, Kyle probably thought it was a joke. A stupid freak accident. He likely tried to push it off with a laugh, expecting it to give way. But he was upside down. His head was lower than his heart. He had no leverage. Every time he pushed, his hands just slid against the smooth plastic of the interior. Okay, he must have told himself. Stop. Take a breath. Just slide out to the side. But there was no side. He was wedged into a well-designed to fit that exact seat. He was in a puzzle box where the pieces had been forced together, and he was the gap in the middle. The air in the van started to feel different. It wasn't just warm anymore. It was heavy. He could feel the blood rushing to his face, making his skin feel tight and his ears ring. He tried to reach for his pockets, but his jeans were pinned tight against his thighs. He couldn't move his arms more than a few inches. It's fine, he reasoned. Someone will see the van shaking. Someone will walk by and see me through the window. I'll just wait. But the windows were tinted, and he was in the floor well, completely invisible to anyone standing outside. To a passerby, the gold Odyssey looked perfectly empty, basking quietly in the afternoon sun. He realized he couldn't take a full breath. Each inhale was shallow, stopped short by the weight of the bench pressing into his sternum. It felt like a heavy hand was resting on his chest, slowly leaning more and more weight onto him. "Hey, Siri," he gasped. His voice sounded thin, even to him. "Call 911. The first call connected at 3:16 p.m. The dispatcher answered, but the audio was a nightmare. The phone was on the floor, muffled by the seat and Kyle's own body. All the dispatcher heard was a rhythmic, strained gasping. "I'm at Seven Hills. I'm going to die here," Kyle managed to choke out. Imagine being that operator. You hear a voice that sounds like it's coming from underwater. You hear thuds. You hear what sounds like someone being strangled. Kyle's internal monologue must have been a frantic loop of logic trying to outrun the panic. She's talking. She can hear me. They're coming. I just have to hold my breath. No, don't hold your breath. Keep breathing. Just small ones. If I stay still, I'll use less oxygen. At 3:26 p.m., a police cruiser actually pulled into the parking lot. Kyle would have heard it. The crunch of the tires on the gravel was probably the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. He was probably thinking, they're here. They're right outside. They're going to open the hatch any second now. I'm going to see the light, and I'm going to breathe again. He waited for the sound of a door handle clicking. He waited for a knock on the glass. He probably tried to scream, but his lungs were so compressed that the scream came out as a pathetic whistle. Outside, the officers looked around. They saw a parking lot full of cars. They didn't see anyone in distress. They didn't see a struggle. They drove past the gold Odyssey, their tires inches away from Kyle's head, and they kept going. The sound of the engine fading away must have been the moment the atmospheric realism turned into pure horror. The logic failed. It's going to be okay part of his brain finally shut off. At 3:35 p.m., he called again. This was a call where he knew. He wasn't rationalizing anymore. He was saying goodbye. I probably don't have much time left, he told the second dispatcher. He was incredibly specific. He gave the make, the model, the color. He told them he was in the software parking lot. He was doing everything right, but the system broke. The dispatcher didn't pass the vehicle description to the officers. They were still looking for a person walking around, not a boy trapped inside a gold bubble. Kyle's chest was on fire. Positional asphyxia is a slow, cruel way to go. Your heart beats faster and faster, trying to get oxygen to your brain, but your lungs can't expand to give it any. Your ribs feel like they're going to snap. Your vision starts to sparkle with white lights, then fades to a muddy gray. He told the dispatcher to tell his mom he loved her. He wasn't crying. He didn't have enough air to cry. He was just stating a fact. He was 16 years old, lying upside down in the back of his car, watching the sun hit the headline of the van, and he was dying. At 3:37 p.m., the officers officially closed the call. They left the school. Kyle was alone. The silence in the van returned, thicker than before. The only sound was the ticking of the cooling engine and the distant, mocking sound of a school day ending. Doors slamming, kids laughing, life continuing just 6 inches of glass away from his face. Nearly 6 hours later, at 9 p.m., Kyle's father, Ronald Plush, arrived at the school. He had been looking for his son for hours. He saw the gold Odyssey sitting there, looking exactly like it had at 3 p.m. He walked up to it. He looked through the window. The tragedy of the story isn't a ghost or a mass slasher. It's the human monster of bureaucracy and mechanical failure. It's the fact that help was there. It was standing in the same zip code, on the same patch of asphalt, and it just looked the other way. The city of Cincinnati eventually settled a wrongful death lawsuit for $6 million. They upgraded their 911 systems. They retrained their dispatchers. They tried to fix the glitch so this would never happen again. But for those of us who drive every day, the story lingers. It makes you look at your back seat a little differently. It makes you wonder about the safety of the machines we surround ourselves with. We live in a world where we are constantly connected, where a satellite can find your phone within 3 meters. Yet, a boy died in a parking lot full of people because no one thought to look inside a gold van. If you were trapped and you could hear the people who were supposed to save you walking away, what would be the last thing you want the world to know? The smell is what it's first. It isn't the smell of a home. It's sharp, acrid, the kind of chemical stench that makes the back of your throat itch and your eyes water. It's gasoline, gallons of it, soaking into the carpet. I'm standing on the porch, my hand still midair, ready to knock again, but the wood feels cold, vibrating with a low, mechanical hum from inside. A second ago, I heard the boys laughing as they ran toward the door. Now there's just a heavy, ringing silence, the kind of silence that feels like a weight on your chest. My palms are so slick with sweat, I can't get a solid grip on my phone. I tell myself I'm overreacting. I tell myself Josh is just a grieving, frustrated father who finally snapped and slammed the door. People do that. They get angry. But my gut is twisting into a knot that won't undo. I should leave. I should get back to the car. But my feet are glued to the welcome mat. Then the first scream starts. It's not a tantrum. It's the sound of a child realizing the world is ending. West Valley City, Utah, isn't where you expect to find a monster. It's a landscape of beige siding, gray asphalt, and the kind of suburban quiet that feels safe until you realize no one is actually looking out their windows. In 2009, Susan Powell lived here. She was a person you'd want as a neighbor, meticulous, organized, the kind of woman who had a color-coded system for her pantry and never missed a thank you note. But Susan wasn't just organized for the sake of it. She was documenting. She was a woman living in a house that felt like it was slowly shrinking around her. I often wonder what those mornings felt like for her, waking up, looking at her husband, Josh, and wondering if today was the day the mask finally slipped. We like to think we'd know if we were living with a killer. We tell ourselves they'd have crazy eyes or a basement full of plastic sheeting. But Josh, he was just there. He was the guy who sat in the corner of the room and let the conversation happen around him. He was socially awkward, emotionally cold, and drifted from job to job like a ghost in his own life. While Susan carried the weight of the mortgage, the kids, and the emotional labor of a dying marriage, Josh just simmered. You met people like this. The ones who don't argue. They just look at you until you feel like you've done something wrong. I tell myself he was just tired, or maybe just different. But Susan knew better. She was recording it all, emails, journals, secret stashes of notes. She wasn't being paranoid. She was building a black box for a flight she knew was going to crash. The horror of the Powell house wasn't a jump scare. It was a slow-motion car wreck. If Josh was a cold void, his father, Stephen, was the rot. Imagine living in a home where your father-in-law doesn't just dislike you. He's unhealthily obsessed with you. Stephen Powell didn't just cross boundaries. He erased them. Think about the feeling of being watched, not by a stranger in a park, but in your own shower. Imagine looking at the wall and seeing the slight glint of a handheld mirror or a camcorder lens through a crack in the door. Stephen would follow Susan, filming her every move, writing songs about her that would make your skin feel like it's trying to crawl off your bones. And Josh, he knew. He watched his father stalk his wife, and he did nothing. That silence is where the true dread lives. It's the sound of a husband who has already decided his wife doesn't matter. Susan wrote in her journal, "If I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one." Read that again. Even if it looks like one. She was rationalizing her own potential murder. I can almost hear her voice in my head. Maybe Stephen is just lonely. Maybe Josh is just stressed. I'll just write this down, just in case. It's probably nothing. I'm just being dramatic. But the probably nothing kept adding up. She started researching divorce. She was looking for the exit sign in a theater that was already on fire. She was planning a life for herself and her two boys, Charlie and Braden. She just needed a little more time. But time is a luxury you don't have when the people who are supposed to love you are actually just waiting for the right moment to delete you. On the night of December 6, 2009, a blizzard was rolling through Utah. It was freezing, the kind of cold that bites into your lungs the moment you step off the porch. Susan was home with the boys. She wasn't feeling well. She went to lie down. Then the glitch happened. In the middle of a winter storm on a school night, Josh decided it was the perfect time to take his 5-year-old and 2-year-old sons camping. Not in a camper, not in a cabin, in a minivan, in the middle of a frozen wasteland. When morning came, Susan was gone. Her purse was still on the counter. Her cell phone was sitting right where she left it. Her shoes, the ones she'd need for the Utah snow, were by the door. People don't just vanish without their shoes. They are taken. When the police arrived for a welfare check, the house felt sanitized. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no blood on the walls, just an absence so thick it felt like it was ringing in the detective's ears. When Josh finally rolled back into the driveway with the kids, he was calm. He was too calm. He had scratches on his hands and neck. He said, He just went camping. He said he had no idea where Susan was. But then Charlie, little 5-year-old Charlie, starts to talk. But then Charlie, little 5-year-old Charlie, starts to talk. Kids don't have the filter we do. They don't know how to lie about the things that break them. He tells the investigators. Mommy went with us to the camp. He says, Mommy stayed in the trunk. Think about that for a second. Imagine being a detective hearing a child say his mother was in the trunk of a van in the middle of a frozen desert. Your brain would try to rationalize it. Maybe he's confused. Maybe they were playing a game. But then you look at Josh's face, that mechanical, cold defensiveness, and you realize the kid isn't playing. He's remembering. The police find blood in the van. They find Susan's DNA. But without a body, the system stalls. Josh moves the boys to Washington, away from the questions, away from the family who loves them. He retreats into himself. He refuses psychological evaluations. He becomes a hermit, fueled by resentment and the terrifying belief that he is the victim. By 2012, he knows the walls are closing in. He leaves a digital will. It's a rant, a manifesto of a man who believes he's being persecuted. He makes one thing very clear. If he can't have his children, no one can. He wasn't asking for help. He was giving a warning. February 5th, 2012. The social worker is waiting on the curb. Charlie and Braden, now 7 and 5, run toward their father's house for a supervised visit. They're excited. They're kids. They don't see the hatchet Josh is holding behind his back. They don't smell the gasoline he spent the morning pouring over the carpet. Josh slams the door. He locks it. The social worker bangs on the wood. She calls 911. Her voice is shaking, barely a whisper because she's afraid he'll hear her. I smell gasoline. He won't let me in. I'm afraid for their lives. Then the explosion. It wasn't a small fire. It was a calculated chemical blast that leveled the house and could be felt blocks away. Josh didn't just want to die. He wanted to erase everything. He killed those boys with a hatchet before the flames even reached them. It was his final act of control. Susan Powell's body has never been found. To this day, she is a ghost in the West Valley Desert. Her parents eventually won a lawsuit against the state, forcing a change in how child services handle high-risk domestic violence cases. It's called justice, but it feels like a hollow word when you think about those two boys running toward a door that was never meant to open again. The scariest thing about Susan Powell isn't the human monster Josh was. It's how many Susans are out there right now, documenting their own fears in journals, telling themselves they're being paranoid, while the person sitting across the dinner table is just waiting for the temperature to drop. If you found a note from someone you loved that said, "If I die, it wasn't an accident," would you believe them right away, or would you try to rationalize it until it was too late? Lakeland, Florida, in late November isn't what the travel brochures promise. It's not palm trees and sunshine. It's a damp, heavy heat that clings to the back of your neck like a wet wool blanket. By 11 p.m., the cul-de-sacs are silent, save for the incessant, electric drone of cicadas in the live oaks. For 76-year-old Loretta Pickard, the world had shrunk to the size of her small frame house on Logue Road. 7 days ago, a surgeon had sliced into her hip to replace a joint that had simply given up, and now her life was measured in inches. I want you to picture the walker. It's that standard medical gray, with 2 neon yellow tennis balls shoved onto back legs, so they don't scuff the linoleum. Every time Loretta moved, it made a specific sound. Thump, slide, squeak. Thump, slide, squeak. It was the rhythm of her survival. To get from the recliner to the kitchen for a glass of water took 4 minutes. To get to the bathroom took 6. She sat in her darkened living room, the TV flickering on a low volume, some late-night talk show she wasn't really watching. The house felt settled. It felt safe. You know that feeling when you're home alone, and the walls seem to wrap around you? That's what Loretta felt. She wasn't a victim. She was a woman in recovery, doing the hard, boring work of getting better. She had her pills, her water, and her cordless phone charging on the side table. She looked at her legs, swollen and bruised from the surgery. Just another week, she thought. By December, I'll be able to walk to the mailbox without breaking a sweat. I just have to be patient. My body is a cage right now, but I have the key. I just need time. She didn't know that time was the one thing she had already run out of. It started with a smell. Not the smell of the fire. Not yet. It was the smell of a hairdryer that's been left on too long. That metallic, ionized tang in the back of your throat. Loretta paused. She looked at the kitchen. Did I leave the stove on? No, I haven't cooked since Tuesday. Is it the AC? It's an old unit. Maybe a belt is slipping. She sniffed the air again. It was faint. If she were younger, she would have stood up, walked to the hallway, and checked the outlets. But every time she stood up, it felt like a hot poker was being driven into her pelvis. I'm being paranoid, she told herself. It's Florida. Humidity does weird things to old wiring. If I call my son now, he'll think I'm losing my mind. If I call the fire department, and it's nothing, I'll be the crazy old lady who wasted their time. Then came the glitch. In the hallway, the light didn't just flicker, it hummed. A low, angry vibration that she could feel in her teeth. And then a thin, lazy coil of gray smoke drifted from the baseboard, snaking upward like a ghost finger. It was so small, so mundane. It didn't look like a threat. It looked like a nuisance. Okay, she thought, her heart starting a slow, heavy thud against her ribs. This is real. But it's okay. I'll just get to the door. It's only 20 feet. She grabbed the handles of the walker. Her knuckles were white, the skin stretched thin like parchment paper. She pushed off the chair. A bolt of white-hot agony shot through her hip, making her vision blur for a second. She took one step. Thump, slide, squeak. She looked at the front door. 20 feet might as well have been 20 miles. She looked back at the hallway. The gray smoke was turning black. It wasn't drifting anymore. It was pulsing out from the walls. I can't do this, she realized. The logic hit her with the weight of a physical blow. I am physically incapable of reaching that handle before the air turned sour. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. She reached for the cordless phone. At 11:45 p.m., she dialed those 3 digits. 911, what is your emergency? My name is Loretta Pickard, she said, her voice eerily steady. I'm at 1115 Logue Road. My house is on fire, and I'm on a walker. I can't get out. The next 20 minutes are a descent into a very specific kind of purgatory. Loretta moved to the bedroom, the room furthest from the smoke. She shut the door, but she knew it wasn't airtight. She could hear the fire now. It didn't sound like a crackling campfire. It sounded like a heavy freight train idling in her living room. A low-frequency growl that made the pictures on her nightstand rattle. They're on their way, Loretta, the dispatcher said. Stay on the line with me. Don't hang up. Loretta sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling so hard she had to grip the phone with both palms. I see the lights, she whispered. Through the bedroom window, the world turned a strobe light blue and red. The cavalry had arrived. She could hear the heavy whoosh of the air brakes on the fire engine. She heard the muffled shouts of men. She heard the beep, beep, beep of a truck backing into position. I'm safe, she thought. They're right there. Any second now. The door is going to burst open. A man in a heavy coat is going to lift me up, and I'll be in the cool night air. I just have to hold my breath for a little longer. But the door didn't burst open. 5 minutes passed. The room was getting warmer. Not the hot summer day warm, but a dry, searing heat that made the moisture evaporate from her eyes. The smoke began to seep through the margins of the door frame, thin, black ribbons that pooled on the ceiling like spilled ink. Are they coming in? Loretta asked. Her voice was smaller now, higher. I hear them outside. Why aren't they coming in? They're setting up honey, the dispatcher replied. There was a flicker of something in the dispatcher's voice, a hesitation. Loretta looked at the door. She expected to hear the rhythmic swing of an axe, the splintering of wood. Instead, she heard nothing, just the roar of the fire in the other room and the distant mechanical hum of the trucks outside. Maybe they can't see me, she thought. Maybe they think the house is empty. Should I crawl to the window? No, I'll fall. If I fall, I'm done. They're professionals. They know what they're doing. There must be a reason. Maybe the roof is unstable? No, they save people from unstable roofs all the time. They're coming. They have to be coming. The heat was now a physical weight pressing down on her chest. The air in the room was being eaten. Every breath felt like inhaling ground glass. She dropped the phone. It clattered onto the carpet. "Loretta?" The dispatcher's voice tinny and distant from the floor. "Loretta, talk to me." Loretta leaned down, her hips screaming in protest, to pick up the phone. As she reached, she looked out the window one last time. She saw a firefighter. He was standing near the edge of the property. He wasn't running. He wasn't holding a hose. He was holding something small and rectangular. A smartphone. Inside the house, the ceiling began to groan. A localized flashover was happening in the kitchen, the moment when every surface in a room reaches its ignition temperature and spontaneously bursts into flame. The hallway was a tunnel of sunbright orange. "They know I'm in here, right?" Loretta whispered into the phone. "They're coming for me, aren't they?" The silence from the other end of the line was the most terrifying thing she had ever heard. It was the silence of a system failing. The silence of a two-in, two-out protocol being followed to the letter while a human being turned to ash. Then the heat reached the bedroom door. The wood didn't catch fire. It simply vanished into a wall of black smoke and heat so intense it melted the plastic of the phone in her hand. Loretta Pickard screamed. It wasn't a movie scream. It was a guttural, primal sound of a body realizing it was being consumed. And then the line went dead. When the fire crews finally crossed the threshold, 8 minutes after they had arrived on scene, they didn't find a survivor. They found what was left of Loretta near her walker. The investigation that followed was a 242-page postmortem of a disaster. It wasn't a ghost that killed Loretta Pickard. It wasn't a demon. It was a human monster made of bureaucracy and apathy. The two-in, two-out rule, a safety mandate requiring for firefighters to be present before entering a burning building, was cited as a reason for delay. But that rule has an explicit exception: if there is a known life safety threat. The dispatcher knew. The computer system should have shown it. But the words trapped and walker never made it to boots on the ground. And then there was a Snapchat video. While Loretta was gasping for air, a fire captain was recording the pretty colors of the blaze for his followers. He wasn't looking for a way in. He was looking for a good angle. He was fired. The chief resigned, and the county paid out a settlement. But you can't deposit a settlement check in a graveyard. Loretta Pickard died believing that rescue was 3 feet away. She died listening to the sirens of the people who were paid to save her, while they stood on her lawn and watched her home turn into a crematorium. The next time you're home alone and you hear a strange on the walls, or you smell something metallic and sharp, don't wait. Don't worry about being the crazy neighbor. Because sometimes the people outside the door aren't waiting for the right moment to save you. They're just waiting for the fire to finish its job. If you were trapped in a room and could see your rescuers through the window, but they weren't moving, what would be your final thought?